Hello to all my friends and family, and welcome to this episode of Jim's 5am Club. It's late afternoon, it's Saturday, it's the first Saturday of freedom, and I'm also very, very happy and proud to announce that New South Wales today also hit its 80% vax rate. 80% of the New South Wales population who are 16 years and older are now fully vaccinated, which enables us to enjoy even more freedoms. So hopefully hopefully Sydney, New South Wales will lead Australia out of the pandemic and out of recession or out of lockdown and build a better place and build momentum for us to build a better future. So what I want to do today is do what I normally do, is take you on a walk and talk where I can go through a book summary so we can vicariously enjoy each other's company and at the same time learn something new. Because what I learnt many years ago is that learning is the process of adding the unknown to the known. The more you learn, the more you're able to know, and the more you're able to learn. But more importantly, applied knowledge, applied education is the key. But if you want to really reinforce something, it's critical that you try and teach what you've learnt. So you try and learn something as a teacher. So by presenting it and stepping through it rationally and logically at a pace and at a level that a 4-year-old could understand is one way of helping each and every one of us become better versions of ourselves. So today's topic, today's book summary that I'm going to go through is called and named and entitled The Case Against Sugar by Gary Taubes. Gary Taubes talks to us about the case against sugar. So to put into perspective and to prepare us for the lessons coming out of this book, the author first kicks off by stating that the first principle is that you must not fool yourself. The first principle in life is that we must not fool ourselves. And then he goes on to say that each and every one of us, in fact, are the easiest to fool. So if you depend on yourself to not get fooled, is folly, because we are all easy to fool. And I remember reading years ago where it says that the more educated one person thinks that they are, the easier it is to fool that person and to play that person, because they think that they are smart and all you have to do is just be one step ahead of them and you've got them hog-tied. You've got them exactly where you need them. So the author then tells us what we don't want to hear, but I guess we all suspect and know that almost everything that we eat, almost everything that is on the supermarket shelves is laced with sugar. Everything that is processed is laden with sugar, and that sugar is not for our benefit. And sugar, we go through the history of sugar, and the author tells us that at one point in time, sugar was an absolute luxury, only available to kings and queens and nobles and the richest of rich people. But with time, it became commercialized and became very, very cheap. And the reason why it became commercialized and cheaper was that they switched from sourcing sugar from sugar cane and were able to generate sugar from sugar beet. So it's cheaper to harvest, cheaper to source, cheaper to transport, and it's extremely versatile because sugar works in both sweet and savoury dishes. And as we said, almost everything we see in a supermarket has added sugar to it. So just so you know where I am, I'm just under the M2. Just under the M2 here. Somewhere between Northmead and Borkham Hills. So I'll head back this way. I just came from there before, went up that track there, and now I'm heading back to the vehicle. Given that it's 7 o'clock and the sun goes down at 7:15, I don't want to be too far in the bush here before it gets dark. So the other point that the author makes, and I guess we all understand this as well, but we don't want to accept it. We all live in denial, is that sugar is highly addictive. Sugar is highly, highly addictive. And I know myself, once I have a small hit of sugar, and the earlier in the day that I have a little bit of sugar, the worse my day will be, because I'll just end up having, rubbish, a mouthful after mouthful throughout the day, and I just become out of control. Don't know if everybody's the same, but once I go down that sugar path, once I submit and bow down to sugar, then the rest of the day is basically a write-off from a dietary and a wellness and a wholeness perspective. So the first formal point to come out of this book from this author is that the author says that calories that originate from sugar are detrimental to our health. He comes out, he says it, doesn't hide it, says that if you're having sugar in your diet, then it's not good for you. So what our parents were telling us all along, what our grandparents were telling us, what our school teachers were telling us was always right. But it's taken us, until the end of our life virtually, to acknowledge it and to accept it. So the other misconception that we've had all our lives, and this is a tricky one, a lot of people don't understand this, but calories are not the same. A lot of people are the same, and it's a misconception. So what's really bad about sugar? What is it about sugar that is detrimental to our health? So the author goes through and technically steps us through and tries to teach us from a scientific perspective what sugar does. And I'll try and relay the message as best I can, given that I'm not a doctor, not a scientist, but just an emissary, just a messenger. He says that sugar, when you have sugar, what it does is it spikes your insulin, which is a hormone that is secreted into your body when signalled by sugar intake. But what insulin does is it tells the body to store those calories as fat, as opposed to turning them into instant energy. What it does is it increases our glucose, which causes us, so the insulin, once insulin gets secreted into your bloodstream, I don't know if we all feel the same, but we feel agitated, unsettled. When you give kids sugar before they go to sleep and they're just bouncing off the walls. The reason why they're bouncing off the walls is not because of the colouring and all the other stuff that you may think. It's the sugar. The sugar, the glucose. What it does is it creates an unsettling feeling where we're agitated. We can't settle. And the author then reminds us that both sugar and carbs are able to spike up your blood glucose levels. So the key message, and it's hard for us Greek Australians, it's hard for many of us who have grown up to have the courage to say no to sugar and no to carbs. You know, I for one grew up in a milk bar. My parents had a milk bar which they worked 7 days a week. Being an only child, you know, I spent most of my time in the milk bar until I was old enough for my parents to let me play with my friends or go and be with my relatives. But, you know, growing up, before I went anywhere, I'd go to the lolly counter and just fill my pockets with freckles and cobbers, grab an ice cream or two, a packet of chips, and that was my diet. Sugar-laden, carbo-laden as well. There's nothing wrong with it, or so I thought, but you know, with the years, it causes issues, leads to diabetes, causes health issues. So it's important to understand that sugar is not okay. But how do we live with that not okay sugar and those not okay carbs? I guess the only thing that I can suggest is to live in moderation, because you can't quite cut them out. But as soon as you bloody start to ingest them, as soon as you have a chocolate or an ice cream, you know, you open the floodgates. Pandora's box opens up, and all the desires, all the bad habits come flooding out and can overwhelm you. So the author here then goes on to say that sugar is linked to a number of illnesses, most prominently diabetes. And the reason for this is, and it's getting worse, is that we've created, according to the author, a sugar culture. And the author gives us an example of a community that lives in New Zealand. The community and the population of Tokelau in New Zealand have a huge sugar intake in their diet. It's a natural thing that these people love their sugar and have a huge intake in their diet on a daily basis. But what we've found is that these people have generated severe diseases. And the diseases that we talk about is that they've got a higher than normal propensity to have diabetes, which leads to other problems. So once again, the key message is to know that sugar doesn't help you on your nutritional well-being journey, and that we should all A, be aware, and B, try to minimise it, and definitely not try to promote it. And I'm guilty of this. Whenever I'm babysitting the grandchildren, I want to be a popular grandfather, so I'm always bringing them ice creams or bringing them some donuts. But in reality, what am I doing? I'm teaching them bad habits, and I'm teaching them habits that may influence their lives in a negative way in the long term. So something to think about, I guess. And the last point that the author talks about is not to believe everything you hear about sugar, because the sugar industry invested a lot of money, according to the author, invested a lot of money in generating a clean image about sugar. Back in the old days, they used to advertise sugar as being a healthy option. But what we need to do is we need to understand that all calories are not the same. So the calories from eating something which is a chocolate or something that is sugar laden, from a processed perspective, isn't the same as having an apple. Even though the apple has sugar, or it has glucose or sucrose, is sugary and sweet, the calories from a nutritional perspective are not the same. So the apple is far better for you than the chocolate. As stupid as it sounds, sometimes we need to mention these things because most of us just don't get it, and we've been misinformed and I guess disinformed over the years, and have formed our own opinions which may not necessarily be accurate and right. So the sugar industry has also done a lot to damage the artificial sweetener industry, and of course they've done that on purpose because it's a competitor to their market and to their products. So a lot of the things that we read about, a lot of things that we hear about artificial sweeteners causing cancer and all of the other things are not necessarily accurate. And as the author says, a lot of that fear, uncertainty and doubt was created by scientists who were funded by the sugar industry, according to this author. So even though artificial sweeteners are not great for you, the chemicals in those artificial sweeteners are only dangerous if you have a lot of it. You know, don't think that just because it's a chemical that sounds dangerous, that it is dangerous. Like everything. And the anti-vaxxers have been big on looking at the chemicals which go into the vaxxers, and then promoting that, these chemicals cause infertility, they cause cancer, they cause this, they cause that. But the scientists, the doctors, the professors who know their stuff tell us, yes, those chemicals are not perfect and they can cause problems, but only when you have tons of it. It's only when you ingest a huge amount of it. Just like if you have a huge amount of anything, it's going to negatively impact you in some way, shape or form. So it's important to put it back into perspective. So I think that's about it. So thank you very much for joining me on this third episode of Jim's 5am Club for this afternoon. I wasn't feeling like doing any 5am clubs today because it's been windy, it's been raining, but had a bit of a snooze this afternoon, watched a bit of tennis today, and thought that it'd be good just to get out, just to limber up and just move around and enjoy the peace and serenity of the bushland round suburban Sydney. How lucky are we that we can live in one of the best countries of the world and be surrounded by pristine nature. Now, it took me 40 years to discover this. I've been living here for well over 40 years. And it's only now, during lockdown, that I've found out what I've been missing out on. Anyway, take care. Have a good rest of the evening on Saturday. And a happy Sunday to everybody. And we'll chat again. Yassas and bye for now. Cheers.